Good morning, students. Till now, we have seen how two different countries, two different diverse backgrounds, culturally, economically, historically, and located in different corners of the world, how they have handled the issue of diversity and multiculturalism, and they have how they have been trying to make the arrangement work. Now we saw that yes, Belgians had displayed greater amount of maturity and bigger heart when accommodating, and of course bigger and far more seriousness and in ensuring that they have a long-lasting solution rather than something which appears to be working in the short run and it turns out to be an extremely complicated mechanism in the long run, compared to the Sri Lankans who didn't have that foresight, whereby after independence in 1948, the Sinhala majority saw this as a great opportunity that yes, because they would be having democracy, so let us have a constitutional which is tailor made for them. And if it was keeping out the minorities like the Tamils, the Muslims, Christians, it didn't really matter because they were a sizable majority and they would always be in a democracy. They would be always winning elections and they would always have their majority within the parliament. Now, students, today we come to the topic of why power sharing is desirable. Now, why is essentially that you have to, as a nation, ensure that there is a power sharing. Firstly, you have to understand why do you enter into power sharing agreement. You enter into a power sharing agreement because you want political stability within the country. Now, unless you do not have a political stability within the country, you cannot have economic stability. And unless there is an economic stability, then the society is always in a turmoil because people do not have enough. Their needs, their requirements, their necessities are not being met. And of course, the quality of life takes up suffering. The health, the education, defense forces, everything, uh, internal security, external security, everything takes a knocking. And that is the reason why you need to have political stability. Now, students, why power sharing is desirable? Now, political sharing can also be ensured by the by the determination and if you want to really rule with an iron fist. There have been people in different there have been leaders in different parts of the world who have ruled with iron fist, and they have really not bothered about power sharing with different constituencies within their own countries or the societies. Now, students, one thing is very important here. Now, we enter into a power sharing agreement. It is imperative that we enter into it, especially when you have a democracy. Students, you must have studied in class 9 what is democracy, right? So I would not get into the details of it, but you have to understand that in a democracy whereby everyone is considered equal in the eyes of law, whereby all the institutions derive their strength um, from you, me, and everyone else. That is, we are the citizens, and the institutions of the state derive their strength, their mandate from the citizens of a country, right? They rule in our name, right? Everyone is same, everyone is equal in the eyes of law. So that is how democracy works. Now, if that is how democracy works, then everyone has the same power within a particular constitutional framework. Now, in a democracy, if you leave certain people out, then that means, students, you have to understand. I would have loved to show this on the board in class, but then I'll just keep it crisp. Students, if you create a system of holy cow within a particular system, that is, holy cow would mean that preferential treatment for certain sections within a system in a democracy, Okay, that yes, this is I favor this group more, I favor that group less, and I favor this one more, and slightly lesser than that, and slightly more than this, then that system would collapse. Not just that it would fail, it would collapse. And that is the problem with democracy. Democracy has to take everyone on board. You cannot leave anyone out in a democracy. Unlike a dictatorial form of government whereby all the power rests in one individual or probably two or three individuals. So, whatever they say is the law. Whatever they do, whatever they desire, that is how it is done, right? Because they have a different kind of a working arrangement, right? They have a different kind of setup. They have their constitution gives different rights to different sections of the state machinery, right? But in India and in all the democracies for that matter, constitution works in a different kind of fashion. There are no preferences within a constitution in a democracy, because in a democracy everyone has to be taken on board, and that is the biggest strength of democracy, but also at the same time that is the biggest flaw in a democracy. Okay, and why do you think China has today, is in a position to challenge superpower like United States of America? Because they do not have a democracy, right? Where in the whole Chinese government is about the Communist Party of China. That is the only party which rules in China. So they do not have to really care about taking everyone on board, right? If you are protesting, just stay out and keep protesting. We really don't care, right? Because the decision is taken only by one body, right? The Politburo of the Communist Party of China, right? It really doesn't matter to them who is protesting, who is not against us, who is against us. Everything is the same. And that is why, because they do not have to take everyone on board, their decision making is swift, they are more focused, and everything saves time for them. And guys, but if you have a democracy, then you will have to ensure that now you have a different working arrangement with the different sections and different constituencies within within the country. And that is why we have to take this issue of power sharing seriously, and that is why this question, why power sharing is desirable. Now there's two different sets of reason can be given in favor of power sharing. Firstly, power sharing is good because it helps to reduce the possibility of conflict between social groups. Since social conflict often leads to violence and political instability, power sharing is a good way to ensure the stability of political order. Imposing the will of majority community over others may look like an attractive option in the short run, as we just saw in Sri Lanka, but in the long run, it undermines the unity of the nation. Because I told you, students, Sri Lanka had an extremely violent, you know, kind of whole journey. The complete 20 years were wasted in the from early 90s. I'm sorry, from early 80s till about 2000. So whole of that 2 decades were wasted. Enormous amount of money got wasted and was just went down the drain just fighting the Tamils who wanted a separate homeland within Sri Lanka, because they said that they had been fighting for almost 50 years, right? Almost not 50 years, rather 40 years, and they wanted something for themselves, and the Sinhali government would not just listen, because it was too pompous about that reality that yes, they are the majority and they would always be having their own government in the parliament, and they would always be having more number of representatives of people in their parliament, so they really do not need to listen to the Tamils. But then, after 40 years, situation came to such a pass whereby a complete civil war broke out, and the Tamils saw this as a point of no return. They wanted a separate Tamil land within Sri Lanka. And it was only after a very violent struggle of 20 years that the Sri Lankan territorial integrity could be ensured, and it was after the whole Tamil leadership, the army, the LTTE, which was kind of actually fighting the Tamil government, the Sri Lankan government. Their leader Prabhakaran was killed in a battle that Sri Lanka could actually now start a new chapter, and they have indeed accommodated a great many numbers of the interests of the Tamils, and that is why you do not hear about Sri Lankan violence and civil war anymore. So that is what it is about. Tyranny of the majority is not just oppressive for the minority, it often brings ruin to the majority as well. Yes, because if the Tamils had been fighting and fighting and fighting, do you think Sri Lanka had any kind of prosperity? It did not. In spite of the Sinhali always claiming that they had the majority, and that is why, because they had the majority, they would do whatever they want, and their leadership would always bring handsome returns. It didn't work out that way. There is a second and a deeper reason why political sharing is good for democracies. Power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. A democratic rule involves sharing power with those affected by its exercise and who have to live with its effect. People have the right to be consulted on how they are to be governed. A legitimate government in one where citizens, through participation, acquire a stake in the system. Let us call the first set of reasons prudential, that is practical, and the second one moral. While practical reasons, that is the prudential reasons, stress that power sharing would bring about better outcome, the moral reason emphasizes that every act of power sharing is valuable. So what it is saying, students, in the second part is that power sharing is desirable because that is actually the spirit of the democracy, the ethos of the democracy. And as I said in the beginning, that it is democracy is a unique system whereby whatever constituency you come from, even if you are a group of, in a country like India, let's say, even if you are a group within 1.3 billion people and your group is barely 1 lakh or 2 lakh, even then I have to listen to you. The democracy has to listen to you. The institutions of the state have to listen to you. Why? Because you are as important and you are as valuable to the nation as, say, someone who is probably a part of a group like Hindu, for that matter, the Hindus who form the majority within India. You are as important as them. Christians would be as important as them. The Sikhs would be as important as them. Right? Why? Because we are democracy. We have to listen to everyone. Otherwise, we are not democracy. Right? That is how you have to understand. It is like, how can there be a fish if it can't swim? You can't then call it a fish, then you will have to call it something else. So a system which does not incorporate the interest, it does not listen to its people, it does not listen to the people who would be, say, numerically in a minority, you cannot call that system a democracy. Then please call it something else. And if you have a democracy and if you want it to remain a functioning democracy, then naturally you have to take everyone on board. And that is why power sharing would become, and it does become imperative, it becomes important. You can't do really without it. And as we had seen in the Belgian and the Sri Lankan model there, uh, we have a very interesting experiment is also there in right in the middle of West Asia, where we would tomorrow start with the Lebanon experiment, whereby Belgians have done something of their own, the Sri Lankans now have done something of their own. In a similar fashion, there is a whole kind of different ethnic built up in a country which is known as Lebanon in West Asia, right? It's very close to Israel and Jordan, okay, and they have a similar problem there where the ethnic buildup is a very complex one, and we shall see tomorrow how they have entered into power sharing agreement with the different sections of the society to ensure the political and the social stability within the country. Thank you.